Hello and good evening. Well, Twitter's defiance to the government's directions to take action against misleading and provocative tweets could cost it dearly. The government is backing its multilingual homegrown rival coup in terms of using it as its communication channel, which could eat into Twitter's user base in India. We'll have more on that for you on Newsnight tonight. I'm Gautam Roy. We'll also talk about how there's been high praise for India at an international sustainable development event in the national capital, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made a strong push for climate justice once again. But first, our headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses World Sustainable Development Summit, says health of people and health of planet will define the progress of humanity. Asserts road to fight climate change is climate justice. World leaders hail Prime Minister Modi's leadership in sustainable development and meeting COVID challenge by sharing vaccines and other essentials. Prime Minister Modi describes the farmers' protest as pure movement, lashes out at rent-a-cause activists or Andolanjivis for sullying the noble movement that is an integral part of India's democracy. Reassures farmers that MSP will continue. In his reply to the motion of thanks on the President's address in the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister asserts India will be a key player in the emerging post-COVID world order, says a self-reliant or Atmanirbhar Bharat will be able to move beyond its demographic dividend. The Congress walks out of the Lok Sabha during Prime Minister Modi's reply to the President's address. Prime Minister says that disruptions in Parliament are a part of a premeditated strategy that will soon be exposed. Death toll in the flash floods in Uttarakhand now stands at 34. 170 people are still missing. Rescue efforts have been hampered by many factors, including the presence of large boulders and even some rainfall. The IT ministry takes to coup India's micro-blogging app, expressing concern at Twitter's blog post regarding the government's request to block some harmful handles under the relevant sections of the Information Technology Act. Describes the release of blog posts ahead of a scheduled meeting of their representatives as unusual. The US welcomes resumption of 4G mobile internet in Jammu and Kashmir, terms it as an important step for local residents, adds it looks forward to continued political and economic progress in the Union territory. Arguments to continue on day 2 of the Trump impeachment trial later tonight. Donald Trump faces charges of inciting the deadly assault on the Capitol. Majority of legal experts maintain it's constitutional to have an impeachment trial after an official has left office. Okay, first up, praise was heaped on India by several world leaders today who took part in the World Sustainable Development Summit for its record in surpassing its commitments for reducing carbon emissions. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the event today, and while he spoke about how India has been adding several feathers to its cap, be it on clean energy, reducing carbon emissions and preserving and promoting biodiversity, he also stressed on how climate justice is important to meet the goal of equitable sustainable development. Here are the top 5 points he made. Where health of our people and health of our planet are interlinked, scale of climate change challenge is well known. Conventional approach can't solve problems. Road to fight climate change is through climate justice. These are some of the things that he said. Further on, if you look at what the PM said, is that there's a sad reality that climate change impacts the poor the most. Climate justice means giving developing countries enough space to grow. And he also said we will achieve climate justice if each of us realize our responsibilities. India is on track to achieve our committed climate change goals. India's intent is supported by concrete action as well. 24% drop in emission intensity has already been achieved. This is just one pointer that he made among several as to how India is meeting its sustainable development goals, and apart from that, its commitments to reducing carbon emissions around the globe as well. Share of non-fossil fuels has grown to 38%. 450 gigawatts renewable energy target has been set by 2030. Furthermore, sustainable development cannot be achieved without equitable access, is what he also said. And also in terms of other things that India has pursued through this period, especially the recent years, he said that, of course, India has attained nearly 100% electrification as well, and India has embraced LEDs long before it became the global norm. 38 billion tons of carbon dioxide has been reduced due to this adoption. Work is underway to start city gas distribution network as well. PM Kusum scheme, 30 gigawatts of solar energy will be generated by 2022 through that scheme. In addition to that, India is among top 3 countries to gain forest cover as well. 1/4 of India's geographical area has green cover now. And let's now, in fact, bring up our In Focus now, which is all about PM Modi's strong push for climate change. And to talk about it, we have tonight with us Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General TERI, and we also have with us Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat. First, to you, Dr. Mathur, in terms of what the Prime Minister said, first of all, he listed out the things that India has done, and it's done plenty when it comes to not just reducing carbon emissions, but the entire goal of sustainable development. But the pursuit of climate justice, that's an unfinished agenda, isn't it?
Go ahead. We will keep on finding ways in which the people who suffer are also compensated. They are provided with training, they are provided with opportunities, so that this is a process which helps everybody forward. We cannot have some people suffering and other people gaining.
Right. Now, Dr. Mohan Kumar, if I could ask you, in terms of how this unfinished agenda has been around for quite some time now, especially one lost a lot of hope on attaining climate justice when Donald Trump walked out of the Paris Accord. But now that the US is back in it with President Biden taking one of those first decisions that he took to reverse Donald Trump's decision, it is a good time to pick up that thread again, isn't it?
And I think the Prime Minister's speech should be interpreted as laying the ground for 2 important summits which are going to happen this year. One is a summit that has already been convened by Joe Biden, as you say, the American president. It's a climate change summit. I don't know if it will happen virtually, but I think the Indian Prime Minister will certainly participate. The second is the November COP26 meeting to be held in Glasgow in November of this year. So you should see the Prime Minister's speech, particularly the 3 points that he makes. 1, don't pick on India. We are doing much better than others. And I don't think you should take the Prime Minister's word for it. If you go to climatetracker.org, they list the countries which are actually taking action to meet the 2-degree commitment, the 1.5-degree commitment, etc. India comes out on top with Bhutan, Ethiopia, and Morocco. So we're doing very well. The second thing that he says is climate justice. Please tackle people who have contributed to greenhouse gas emissions, not countries like India, which are just beginning to develop. So that's the second point he's making. The third point I thought was very, very important, which he said that the one-size-fits-all approach will not work in climate change. I agree entirely with my friend and colleague, Dr. Ajay Mathur, that the poor people are suffering more, and poor people are suffering in India for absolutely no fault of theirs. They haven't contributed to climate change, and yet they are being impacted much more than people in prosperous countries. So all in all, I see this important conference and the PM's speech as laying the agenda from India's perspective to the 2 summits that are going to follow later in the year.
Well, certainly, and that does need to be pursued. And what better way to do it than, in fact, Dr. Ajay Mathur, to have leaders from across the world also acknowledging what India has done so far and is promising to do even more in the coming years when it comes to not just reducing carbon emissions, but also on the biodiversity front, also on forestation, and of course on clean energy.
One of the things that two presidents made, one of the points that they made was India is sharing COVID vaccines even now as it is vaccinating its own people. This is in such contrast to what is happening in the rest of the world. The Prime Minister made the point that you have to be large-hearted. Climate justice is about being large-hearted. It's about concrete actions. And I think, again, I'll join Dr. Mohan Kumar in making the point that look at this in the larger picture. This is not about making big pledges. It's about what do you do now, what do you do tomorrow. So it's about concrete actions. And I think it is against that India's actions have to be measured. We promised very ambitious goals in 2015. We already seem to have achieved them. We are being seen through the International Solar Agency, through the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and now through the sharing of vaccinations as leading the world in moving ahead. This has to be seen as a very different way of dealing with the issues involved rather than preaching and saying, thou should do X.
Certainly. Let's just play out, in fact, for the benefit of our viewers, what exactly were the big takeaways from what the Prime Minister said at this summit all about sustainable development. Listen in.
The road to fighting climate change is through climate justice. At the root of climate justice is the principle of being large-hearted. Climate justice is also about thinking of the bigger and long-term picture. Global platforms like this are important for our present and our future. Friends, two things will define how the progress journey of humanity will unfold in the times to come. First is the health of our people. Second, the health of our planet. Both are interlinked. India's intent is supported by concrete action, powered by spirited public efforts. We are on track to exceed our commitments and targets from Paris. We committed to reduce emissions intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels. You will be happy to know that a drop of 24% in the emission intensity has already been achieved. There are many startups working on renewable energy, environment-friendly technology, and more. As policymakers, we should support as many of these efforts. The energy of our youth will certainly lead to outstanding results. Renewable energy is picking speed in India. We are well on track to setting up 450 gigawatt of renewable energy generating capacity by 2030. Here, I would like to applaud our private sector and several individuals who are contributing to this. India is ready to do whatever possible to further sustainable development. Our human-centric approach could be a force multiplier for global good. The support of research of institutions like TERI are important in these efforts.
So India is already doing more than it committed to do under these international commitments as far as carbon emissions are concerned. Mohan Kumar, if I could come to you again, in terms of making the case for climate justice, do you feel that it is quite an uphill task still, because India is, like many people said, would happen that if the Western world doesn't live up to its commitments, India will hold everyone to ransom. India is not doing that. India is doing something that is quite the contrary. It's exceeding its commitment. So if that is the case that we can make, that look, if we can do it, why can't you live up to your end and do more, in fact, as well?
So you're absolutely right. I think India has overachieved its Paris targets. But you know, what is ironic is that you could become victims of your own success. We could become victims of our own success. You might very well see more demands being made on India as a major emitter. For example, I'm happy he mentioned climate justice. I'm happy he mentioned, the PM mentioned, one size doesn't fit all, because these are different ways of saying common but differentiated responsibility, which has always been an article of faith for India. The fact of the matter is China, Japan, South Korea, EU, United States, all of them have indicated a peak year for emissions.
Yes.
And some of them have indicated a year in which they will achieve carbon net neutrality.
Yes.
Now, we cannot do that by definition, because we are just contributing 7% of the global emissions. Unlike China, which contributes 25%, EU, which contributes 13%, and United States, which contributes 15%. Now, this is a case that needs to be made. I don't think we should be naive in thinking, and I think my colleague Dr. Mathur knows this much better, because he has been participating. I mean, I participated in Paris along with him, but he has participated in many more conferences. We will come under pressure. And I think it's good that the Prime Minister has said this upfront, that climate justice has to be on the agenda. It's one way of saying we need policy space, we need the room for maneuver in India while we go on the pathway for green development. So that is the important case I think the Prime Minister has made, as I said, ahead of the 2 summit meetings, which will see India being asked, you know, why, for example, I think Western countries will ask, why cannot India indicate a year in which its emissions will peak?
Okay.
So I think the Prime Minister is preparing the ground for that. And I think that's a very shrewd thing to do. And I think TERI and other organizations have obviously an important role to play in the run-up to these 2 summits.
And Dr. Ajay Mathur, how would Prime Minister Modi and India meet this challenge where, of course, people are seeing, like Mohan Kumar, is that there might be more expected of India as well, which would be unfair, because India is not in the kind of position that other countries are, that have emitted, that have a huge history of emitting far more than we ever did, and are at a different stage of development altogether. India is still progressing. Its energy needs, as it's been projected, will only grow. It will become the 3rd highest user in the coming years as well. That's just been said yesterday.
Well, I think the Prime Minister focused on the one size does not fit all. I think that's at the heart of the story. What we are showing is a very different way of moving ahead. We are showing that if you push renewables, it becomes the most cost-effective way. And this is a zero carbon emission cost-effective way of moving ahead. This is very different. This is a very different approach from saying, I'm going to close down my coal plants and replace them by renewables plants. Here you're saying growth is happening. I will meet that incremental growth through renewables. And I think what the world needs to recognize is that this is as legitimate an approach and as effective an approach as what makes sense to the developed countries.
And who can we partner with in, pursuing this goal of climate justice as well? Or can it be done, a convincing case be made by India, just, showing it by example?
So, this is an area in which we need to convince. I don't think we need to convince our developing country partners. They understand it as well as we do. They look at India to say this and to show that it can be done. I think the people we need to talk to are our developed country partners. We need to talk to the UK, primarily because it is the host of the next conference of the parties of the Climate Change Convention. And I think we need to bring into the agenda the issue of climate justice.
Certainly, that
we have
is,
seen in the past,
yes,
when at Paris, how the US played an outsized role in influencing countries to come to what is now called the Paris Agreement. I think we will need to talk to the US to make sure that climate justice becomes part of the approach that we look at for the meeting in the UK.
Certainly, and let's hope that we can make progress on that front, because it is vital for India's and the world's sustainable development as well. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dr. Ajay Mathur and Mohan Kumar, to talk about this.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay, now addressing the World Sustainable Development Summit 2021, Union Environment, Forest and Climate Change Minister Prakash Javadekar said that India is playing an active role in tackling climate change. He said that 4 global reports have lauded the steps taken by the Government of India on mitigating climate change.
United Nations Environment Program Emission Gap Report, other is Climate Change Action Tracker Report, third is Climate Change Performance Index, and fourth is Transparency Report. All these 4 reports say that India under Prime Minister Modi is leading from the front and is implementing all its pledges much well before time.
And Prakash Javadekar also said that India is in a key role on the environment front as well. He said that the Government of India is continuously making efforts to deal with the problem of climate change, and several big steps are being taken on this front as well. He added that the country has seen a reduction in carbon emissions too.
United Nations Environment Program Emission Gap Report, other is Climate Change Action Tracker Report, third is Climate Change Performance Index, and fourth is Transparency Report. All these 4 reports say that India under Prime Minister Modi is leading from the front and is implementing all its pledges much well before time.
And from the Caribbean, the President of Guyana, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, lauded India for its responsible leadership in mitigating climate change, and Guyana has welcomed the commitment that India has made.
We have reduced emission intensity, we have increased forest, we have also given new target of restoration of degraded land, and with 90 gigawatts of renewable, we will definitely achieve Prime Minister target given by Prime Minister of 450 gigawatts.
And from the Caribbean, the President of Guyana, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, also lauded India for its responsible leadership in mitigating climate change, and Guyana has welcomed the commitment.
For us to achieve the targets of climate change, we need strong leadership, commitment to multilateralism, and mobilization of resources championed by responsible leadership. India has demonstrated it is committed to such leadership, and Guyana welcomed this commitment. On a personal note, and that of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, I would also like to express our gratitude to Prime Minister Modi and the people of India for sharing with our region also 500,000 vaccines, even as you are battling your own circumstances. It is this type of leadership that will bring our world closer together. I thank you sincerely.
So India's vaccine diplomacy also getting just applause at an international forum. Now, Speaker of the Majlis, the Maldivian Parliament, Mohammed Nasheed, lauded India on setting an ambitious 450 gigawatt of renewable energy target by 2030.
In December, the Honorable Prime Minister announced an eye-catching target. India will install, it said, 450 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. This is an extraordinary ambitious goal which shows incredible leadership by the Indian leadership, by the Prime Minister. Compared with climate targets announced by all other countries, we believe India's new target is the biggest improvement in terms of its climate benefit of any country on earth.
Amina J. Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, lauded Prime Minister Modi on the International Solar Alliance as well.
India has been an active, influential player on climate change from the very beginning. Even before the Paris Agreement, India was acting thoughtfully and strategically on its energy, environment and development priorities. You have translated this strategic thinking into policies and into programs. Prime Minister Modi stood resolutely with the Paris Agreement, launching 2 major environmental initiatives in the time since: the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the International Solar Alliance. India is now poised to lead on the development of technologies that produce low-carbon steel and cement, and as co-leaders with Sweden of the Leadership Group for the Industry Transition.
So clearly India is going onwards in its journey on combating climate change and will take up the cause of climate justice as well. That has been clearly indicated by Prime Minister Modi today. Now moving on, the ball has been set rolling in the US Senate to ensure former President Donald Trump does not get another chance to run for the Oval Office. The American upper house voted 56 to 44 in favor of proceeding to carry out the impeachment trial against Trump, indicating that there are some Republicans who want to see him being punished for instigating the US Capitol riots on the 6th of January. Now it's a question of whether more Republican senators can be swung through the course of the trial. Conviction requires a 2/3 majority, and we'll find out in due course.
On this vote, the ayes are 56, the nays are 44, and pursuant to S. 47, the Senate having voted in the affirmative on the foregoing question, the Senate shall proceed with the trial as provided under the provisions of that resolution.
U.S. senators voting to move forward with former President Donald Trump's second impeachment trial on a charge of inciting the assault on the Capitol. Democrats prosecuting the case opened Tuesday's proceedings by showing a video montage of Trump's 6th January speech and what they termed as the deadly writing by some of his supporters. In contrast to the Democrats' emotional presentation, Trump's weak defense attacked the process and argued that the proceeding was unconstitutional and partisan effort to close off Trump's political future. Meanwhile, the lead House manager became emotional as he recounted the danger his family were put in when they visited him at the Capitol during the 6th January riot by Trump supporters.
I told her how sorry I was, and I promised her that it would not be like this again the next time she came back to the Capitol with me. And you know what she said? She said, "Dad, I don't want to come back to the Capitol." Of all the terrible, brutal things I saw and I heard on that day, and since then, that one hit me the hardest.
This is nothing less than the political weaponization of the impeachment process.
We are really here because the majority in the House of Representatives does not want to face Donald Trump as a political rival in the future. And that's why they have to get over the jurisdictional hurdle, which they can't get over.
Staying far away from impeachment, U.S. President Joe Biden has no plans to watch trial in the Senate and reaffirmed his faith in the Senate to conduct the trial impartially. Opening arguments in the trial are set to begin on Wednesday and will continue at least through Friday, but could extend into next week. The House impeachment managers and Trump's team will have 16 hours over 2 days each to present their case to the Senate. The trial is being held with extraordinary security around the Capitol in the wake of the siege, including armed security forces and a perimeter of fencing and razor wire. Trump is the only president to go on trial in the Senate after leaving office and the only one to be impeached twice. He is just the third president in US history to be impeached. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And closer home in Myanmar, while the military rulers are proving to be unrelenting under huge international as well as domestic pressure to allow the return of democracy, those protesting against are dealing with security crackdown in innovative ways. Even protests in different cities have become very varied and colorful. Take a look.
This disturbing visual adding fuel to the protests in Myanmar. Capturing the moment, a female protester was shot in the head from a live bullet during clashes between police and protesters in Nay Pitao on Tuesday, on the most violent day so far of demonstrations against the military coup in the country.
Her condition is critical right now. Now we see the military taking brutal action on us. But we, young people, will lead the protest from various groups in every peaceful way.
Protesters took to the streets of Myanmar for a fifth day on Wednesday. In a unique style, women wearing flamboyant gowns and wedding dresses marched demanding the release of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi in Yangon. Bodybuilders too swapped shirts for protest signs in the anti-coup demonstrations. In another protest with a difference, dozens of Myanmar protesters, many sitting in rubber tubs, gathered outside the Japanese embassy in Yangon, asking for Japan's support in their opposition to Myanmar's military government. Meanwhile, a medical clinic recently opened in Nay Pitao to attend to protesters was forced to move out to a new place.
We opened this clinic especially with the purpose of being able to give emergency treatments to the people who got injured from the revolution, regardless of religions or ethnics. Due to the current situation, they face difficulties when they need to go to clinics and hospitals.
A handful of protesters even gathered outside the Myanmar embassy in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday to protest the military coup. They approached the embassy and presented a letter calling on the staff of the embassy to resign and join the civil disobedience movement against the Myanmar military's coup. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Now, Cambodia launched its coronavirus inoculation drive today using over 6 lakh vaccine doses. Sons of long-serving Prime Minister Hun Sen and government ministers were among the first to be inoculated. The Southeast Asian nation of about 1 crore 60 lakh has managed to limit the spread of the disease. Cambodia has reported just 478 COVID-19 infections and no deaths. While South American country Peru has also launched the inoculation drive. Health officials kicked off the program in the intensive care unit of Lima's Arzobispo Loyola Hospital, where medical staff were slated to receive the first of the 3 lakh doses. Peruvian President Francisco Sagasti was vaccinated later in the day. Sagasti also encouraged vaccine skeptics to get themselves inoculated. South Korea today said that it would grant its first approval for a coronavirus vaccine to British-Swedish pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. It's being said that AstraZeneca will be used in the vaccine will be used in people 65 years or older, despite advisory panels' warning of a lack of data on its efficacy for the elderly. Several European countries have warned that the shot should only be given to those aged between 18 to 64 years. Earlier, these concerns had threatened to upend South Korea's plan to prioritize elderly residents and medical workers in the first round of vaccination. Considering the present situation, South Korea has over 81,000 cases of COVID-19, with a death toll surging past 1,000. In the UK, Transport Minister Grant Shapps today said that he is not certain as to when people would be able to travel internationally. The announcement has come as Britain has tightened its grip on arrivals into the country. Shapps said levels of vaccinations in the UK and in other countries will play a significant role and be a factor in unlocking international travel. Britain will require passengers arriving from countries with high coronavirus variants to pay for 10 days of quarantine in hotels. The rule breakers will be facing heavy fines or jail terms under tighter restrictions coming in from next week. The UK presently has over 39,72,000 cases of COVID-19, with the death toll surging past 1,13,000.
The key question could be, well, when will we be able to travel? When will we be able to international travel? The answer is we don't know the answer to that question yet. It depends on both the level of vaccination here and critically elsewhere. And as I mentioned, just checking the figures this morning, we've done 13 million plus vaccinations, which is just more than the whole of the EU put together. So we'll need to wait for other countries to catch up as well in order to be able to do that wider international unlock, because we can only control the situation here.
And several people were injured in a shooting at a health clinic that took place on Tuesday at the Alina Clinic in Buffalo in Minnesota. That's in the US. There was also a report of a bomb exploding inside the clinic. A male suspect has been taken into custody. The man has been identified as Gregory Paul Ulrich, an elderly gunman believed to be a disgruntled former patient. He was arrested at the scene by the police. Bomb squad investigators called to the scene have examined a suspicious package found in the clinic's lobby. Additional suspicious devices were also found at a nearby motel where Ulrich had stayed. The man has been identified by authorities as an individual well known to law enforcement. The man was taken into custody shortly after the gunfire erupted. Ulrich is scheduled to appear for arraignment in the case this Thursday. And in Latin America, Chile will be expelling more than 100 Colombian and Venezuelan migrants who entered the South American nation across its remote northern border. The government's decision has come after 2 migrants died earlier this month of exposure after entering Chile from Bolivia through a highland pass in the Andes Mountains. Opponents of Chile's crackdown on illegal immigration say heavy-handed policing of borders only hurts the migrants involved and will do little to stem the flow of immigration. They have called instead for more humanitarian refugees in the rugged border mountains and for boosting regional coordination. And now let's get you some more updates from back home. Prime Minister Modi replied to the motion of thanks on the President's address in the Lok Sabha today. He spoke of Atmanirbhar Bharat and urged people to set sights on where India will be when it completes 100 years of independence, when it is about to complete 75. He also took on those who live for protests spreading fear and disinformation in the country and lashed out at the opposition for its premeditated strategy. Here's why.
Replying to the motion of thanks on the President's address in the Lok Sabha, PM Modi targeted people who spread fear and hatred and described it as a matter of concern for the country.
मैं किसान आंदोलन को पवित्र मानता हूं और भारत के लोकतंत्र में आंदोलन का महात्म्य है और रहने वाला है और जरूरी भी है। लेकिन जब आंदोलनजीवी पवित्र आंदोलन को अपने लाभ के लिए बर्बाद करने के लिए निकलते हैं, तब क्या होता है? कोई मुझे बताए। टोल प्लाजा को तोड़ना, उस टोल प्लाजा को कब्जा करना, उस टोल प्लाजा को न चलने देना, ये जो तरीके चले हैं, वो तरीके क्या पवित्र आंदोलन को कलंकित करने का प्रयास है कि नहीं?
The Prime Minister asserted that neither has any farm mandi had been shut nor has minimum support price discontinued after 3 laws were enacted. He said that this law has not been imposed on the farmers, rather they can decide to sell crops on their own free will.
ऑर्डिनेंस के बाद और पार्लियामेंट में कानून बनने के बाद किसी भी किसान से मैं पूछना चाहता हूं कि पहले जो हक उनके पास थे, जो व्यवस्थाएं उनके पास थी, उसमें से कुछ भी इस नए कानून ने छीन लिया है क्या? इसकी चर्चा, उसका जवाब कोई देता नहीं है। सब कुछ वैसा का वैसा वो है पुराना। क्या हुआ है? एक अतिरिक्त विकल्प व्यवस्था मिली है, वो भी क्या कंपलसरी है? किसी कानून का विरोध तो तब मायना रखता है कि जब वो कंपलसरी हो। ये तो ऑप्शनल है। आपको मर्जी पड़े यहां जाना है जाइए, आपको मर्जी पड़े वहां नहीं जाना है वहां जाइए। जहां ज्यादा फायदा हो वहां किसान चला जाए, ये व्यवस्था की गई है।
The PM also stated that the reforms in agriculture are necessary for the country's progress. He further said that the government has made efforts for the betterment of the agricultural sector who are facing challenges for years.
मैं ये तो देख रहा था कि वो इस कानून के कलर पर तो बहुत बहस कर रहे थे। ब्लैक है कि वाइट है, ब्लैक है कि वाइट है। अच्छा होता उसके कंटेंट पर चर्चा करते, अच्छा होता उसके इंटेंट पे चर्चा करते, ताकि देश के किसानों को भी सही चीज पहुंच सकती थी।
PM Modi lashed out at the Congress for negative approach. He said Congress leaders had adopted one strategy in Rajya Sabha and different approach in the Lok Sabha, and this shows its divisions.
हमें मानते थे कि हिंदुस्तान की बहुत पुरानी पार्टी कांग्रेस पार्टी, जिसने करीब 6 दशक तक इस देश में एक चक्री शासन किया, ये पार्टी का ये हाल हो गया है कि पार्टी का राज्यसभा का सबका एक तरफ चलता है और पार्टी का लोकसभा का सबका दूसरी तरफ चलता है। ऐसी डिवाइडेड पार्टी, ऐसी कंफ्यूज पार्टी न खुद का भला कर सकती है, न देश की समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए कुछ सोच सकती है। इससे बड़ा दुर्भाग्य क्या हो सकता है?
In his reply to the motion of thanks on President's address, Prime Minister said that India is knocking at the doors of 75 years of independence, and it's a matter of pride for every Indian and an occasion to move forward, and urged to make a new resolve of where we want to take India at the 100 years of freedom mark. With Shailendra Mishra, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And the PM also said during the reply to the motion of thanks on the President's address that the world post-COVID is turning out to be a very different place, and in such times, remaining isolated from the global trends will be counterproductive. The PM added that the country is working towards building an Atmanirbhar Bharat which seeks to further global good.
आज पोस्ट कोरोना जो नया वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर तैयार होगा, और होना ही है, नए वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर में भारत को अपनी जगह बनाने के लिए भारत को सशक्त होना पड़ेगा, समर्थ होना पड़ेगा, और उसका रास्ता है आत्मनिर्भर भारत। आज हिंदुस्तान के हर कोने में वोकल फॉर लोकल सुनाई दे रहा है, और लोग हाथ लगा के देखते हैं लोकल। यह आत्मगौरव का भाव आत्मनिर्भर भारत के लिए बहुत काम आ रहा है, और मुझे विश्वास है कि हम सबकी सोच, हमारी नीतियां, हमारे निर्णय भारत को आत्मनिर्भर बनाने के लिए जो भी आवश्यक बदलाव हो, उस बदलाव की ओर होने चाहिए।
Now, in further updates, Twitter has refused to block over 1,000 handles the central government asked it to take action against for spreading disinformation related to the farmers' agitation and malicious content as well. Its blog post justifying its stand and questioning the government's interpretation of Indian laws has made the government respond on Coup, which is India's homegrown multilingual microblogging award-winning rival of Twitter. Here's more.
Microblogging site Twitter is in the firing line of the central government after refusing to take action the government wanted it to take against 1,178 accounts for allegedly spreading misinformation on the farmer protests and provocative content. The government wanted such accounts blocked, but Twitter instead blocked justification for its defiance, questioning the government's directions and its reading of the law. It said, "We do not believe that the actions we have been directed to take are consistent with Indian law and in keeping with our principles of defending protected speech and freedom of expression. We have not taken any action on accounts that consist of news media entities, journalists, activists and politicians. To do so, we believe, would violate their fundamental right to free expression under Indian law." Hitting where it hurts, the government responded to Twitter on a multilingual, homegrown, rival microblogging platform Coup, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has cited in the past as well in his Mann Ki Baat radio program, and is now being actively promoted by several union ministers. The Ministry of Electronics and IT said on Coup, Upon the request of Twitter seeking a meeting with the government, the Secretary IT was to engage with senior management of Twitter. In this light, a blog post published prior to this engagement is unusual. Government will share its response soon. The government had asked Twitter to block certain accounts for similar reasons earlier as well, citing Indian laws and Supreme Court rulings. Twitter even blocked some accounts, but the very next day reactivated them. Twitter did this despite the government citing more than half a dozen Supreme Court rulings in its notice to Twitter. The government had also cited the order of the Supreme Court Constitution Bench. It had also said that Twitter is in violation of Section 69A of India's Information Technology Act. Penalty for the violation involved fines and even a 7-year prison term. The BJP also took on Twitter for its defiance. The party's General Secretary BL Santosh tweeted, "You state that you are platform. Then you decide what to delete and what not. You have to act according to law of land. You can't have your own rules. The country is governed based on constitution, not some corporate rules." Twitter will only have itself to blame if it loses users in India. Twitter shut down former US President Donald Trump's handle soon after the Capitol riots on the 6th of January. But it is giving a lot of leeway to those spreading misinformation and fake news on the farmers' protest in India, vitiating the atmosphere. Clearly, Twitter is indulging in doublespeak on freedom of expression, and it needs to revisit its stand. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Now, the U.S. State Department's Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs, in a tweet, has welcomed the resumption of 4G mobile internet in India's Jammu and Kashmir. It termed this as an important step for local residents and that U.S. looks forward to continued political and economic progress to restore normalcy in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the death toll in the glacier tragedy in Uttarakhand has crept up to 34. 170 people are still missing. Search and rescue efforts have been hampered by many factors, including the presence of large boulders and even some rain today.
The work of removing slush from Tapovan Hydel project tunnel in Uttarakhand's Chamoli district continues, with over 30 people still fear trapped. Emergency workers are racing against time to dig through the mud and rocks. Giant floodlights lit up one entrance of the tunnel as huge excavator slowly worked its way through the sludge, carrying huge piles out and depositing it beside the river, so rescuers could carefully search the debris for survivors or remains. Workers used heavy machinery to try remove giant boulders from road blocking the way to the second under construction power plant.
जो टेक्निकल एक्सपर्ट्स हैं एनटीपीसी के, वो ये कह रहे हैं कि अब थोड़ा रिस्की है, अंदर से पानी का बहुत तेज बहाव हो सकता है, तो आगे रहने किसी को अंदर जाने का उन्होंने अभी थोड़ा मना किया है, सिर्फ मशीन ही धीरे धीरे जाके जितना हो सके वो मलबा निकालेगी.
Even as the rescue and relief operations continue, death toll in the tragedy has risen.
रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन है उसमें बड़ी प्रोग्रेस नहीं है. उसमें इतना है कि अभी जब जो मलबा खोद रहे हैं तो उसमें बड़े बोल्डर भी अब दिखने लगे हैं. तो हमें मलबे से 8 और नदी से 24, नदी में भी श्रीनगर तक हमें बॉडीज मिली हैं, तो 24, कुल 32 बॉडीज हमको अभी तक मिली हैं, जिनमें से 8 आइडेंटिफाइड हैं, 24 आइडेंटिफाइड नहीं हैं.
Agencies including ITBP, Army, local administration met in Joshimath to review the relief and rescue work. Doordarshan team arrived by helicopter along with the rescue team to assess the devastation caused by the disaster in Raini village due to the avalanche.
जो आसपास के गांव हैं, जो कि पैदल रास्ता जहां है, जहां रोड कनेक्टिविटी नहीं है, उन गांवों में हमारे जवान अपने बैग में डाल के उन लोगों को पहुंचा रहे हैं जिनके पास राहत सामग्री पहुंचनी चाहिए.
कि अभी हमारे 7-8 गांव ऐसे हैं जो रोड से हट से कनेक्टिविटी खत्म हो चुकी है, तो इन दूरस्थ गांवों के लिए हम पहले कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अपना राशन जल्द जल्द उन गांवों तक पहुंचे.
3-4 विलेजेस में जाके, जैसे पैणी हो गया, एक क्या कहते हैं ये ऑन स्पॉट रेणी और लाता में, और क्या कहते हैं सराय टोटा में, हमने उसी दिन जाके कैंप कर दिया, जिससे कि लोगों का जो पोस्ट ट्रॉमेटिक स्ट्रेस होता है उसको दूर किया जाए.
Relief material is being sent to villages cut off due to Dhauliganga floods.
बहुत स्लो काम हो रहा है. यहाँ पर काफ़ी सारी
डेड बॉडीज़ भी निकल रही है, कल 4 बॉडी निकली थी, इसलिए काम बहुत स्लो हो रहा है क्योंकि हम चाहते हैं कि डेड बॉडीज़ रिकवर हों और उनको अच्छे तरीके से उनके परिजनों को सुपुर्द किया जाए.
Administration's promptness in providing basic facilities like flour, sugar has brought some relief to the common people. Temporary health services are being run in the affected areas.
हमारे गांव वालों ने बचाया हमको, दीवार तोड़ के निकाला, घुटने और यहाँ सूजन आ रखी है हाथ पे.
Family members of the missing have been trying to find them using social media, while efforts are on since Sunday night to rescue people trapped in the tunnel. With Urmalesh and Chandrasekhar, News Night Desk, DD India.
Well, we hope that people who are still missing are found in hale and hearty condition, although that does look a little difficult given that the tragedy took place on Sunday morning. Now, continuing its vaccine maitri with the world, India provided COVID-19 vaccines to Caribbean countries, Dominican and Barbados. The two nations received Made in India vaccines on Wednesday. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar informed about the arrivals on Twitter as well. He tweeted, and I quote, "Consolidating our Caribbean connect." In another tweet, posting a picture of the consignment reaching Dominica, he said, and I quote, "A gesture of goodwill, an example of support. Made in India vaccines arrive in Dominica." And Prime Minister of Dominica thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi for quick delivery of 2 consignments of Covishield COVID-19 vaccines. He said that did not imagine that the prayers of his country would be answered so swiftly.
I must confess that I did not imagine that the prayers of my country would have been answered so swiftly. Being the leader of a small Caribbean island with a population of 72,000 people, I did not fancy my chances of getting such a swift, positive response to my request of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. One would have thought and understood that in a global pandemic such as this, a nation's size and might would have been the primary considerations. But it is to the credit of Prime Minister Modi that our request was considered on merit and the equality of our people was recognized. I'd like to take this opportunity once again to express my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to Prime Minister Modi, his government, and the citizens of India.
And Barbados Prime Minister also thanked Prime Minister Modi after receiving the first batch of COVID-19 vaccines. She said India's gift of 1 lakh COVID-19 vaccines arrived in Barbados earlier today. This was a very special moment for all Barbadians, and I want to thank Prime Minister Modi for his quick, decisive and magnanimous action in allowing us to be the beneficiaries of these vaccines. And Bangladesh government organized a vaccination program for foreign diplomats and spouses in Dhaka today. Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Vikram Doraiswamy, said that India and Bangladesh working together with Bangladesh in providing vaccines shows close friendship.
India and Bangladesh and our other neighbors must vaccinate together. We must make every effort to fight this disease together. And so our working together with Bangladesh in providing this vaccine was intended as part of the effort of showing how close our friendship is. And I'm very grateful to the government of Bangladesh for taking this forward so quickly. I think I should first of all say to the Bangladeshi friends, your government is doing a terrific job in vaccinating people. Already within 3 days, over 100,000 people have been vaccinated. This is the only way forward. We must be confident, we must be courageous in fighting this disease and getting back to our normal life. And I think for the rest of the world, it's also a fact that if countries like India and Bangladesh, Nepal and Bhutan can cooperate in something as difficult as this, where there is so much temptation to say vaccine only for me, then the rest of the world can also do so. So I think it's a great opportunity for India and Bangladesh and our other neighbors to show how partnership and multilateralism really is the way forward.
So you're sending out a strong message of cooperation all across in different corners of the world. Now there have been more developments from home as well, so here's all of them in this particular wrap.
The Rajya Sabha passed the Major Port Authorities Bill 2020 for better regulation, operation and planning of major ports in India. The bill provides greater autonomy to these ports. It also mandates the setting up of a board of Major Port Authority for each major port. These boards will replace the existing port trusts. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs approved a proposal of the Department of Fertilizers for grant in aid of 1 billion rupees to Brahmaputra Valley Fertilizers Corporation Limited, Namrup in Assam, to sustain the operations of its urea manufacturing units. This will restore the urea production capacity of 3.90 lakh metric tons per annum and ensure timely availability of urea to the tea industry and farming sector in the entire northeastern region, especially Assam, and will also strengthen the Atmanirbhar Bharat or Self-Reliant India campaign. Union Minister for Civil Aviation Hardeep Puri said that the government's effort is to open up more flight operations with COVID-19 restrictions in place. Speaking from the floor of the Rajya Sabha, the minister said opening up flights from more than 80% also depends on the behavior of COVID-19. The Supreme Court has stayed the dismantling of decommissioned aircraft carrier INS Virat and issued notices on a private firm's petition. It has sought responses from the Ministry of Defence and Shriram Shipbuilders, which bought the iconic ship in an auction last year. The Apex Court was hearing a plea to convert the warship into a maritime museum and multifunctional adventure centre. BJP President JP Nadda participated in a tea session or Chai Pe Charcha at a village in Kalaikunda in the West Midnapur district of West Bengal. He said that those who won the elections in the name of Ma Mati Manush are now engaged in dictatorship, appeasement and strong-arm tactics. Alleging that the Mamata Banerjee dispensation has not done anything for the welfare of the farmers and tribals in West Bengal, Nadda said that his party will ensure all-round advancement of the people of the state if voted to power. The Delhi Police Special Cell arrested one more person in connection with the Republic Day violence case. Iqbal Singh, one of the accused in the case, was arrested from Hoshiarpur in Punjab on Tuesday night. Several videos of Iqbal Singh had surfaced from January 26th, where he was seen urging crowds to enter the Red Fort. He has been accused of instigating the crowd near the Lahori Gate to storm the Red Fort.
And that's all we have for the moment in Newsnight tonight, but we leave you with these images that have gone viral. A lawyer battling cat filter difficulties on a Zoom court hearing. Listen in and laugh along. Have a great night.
Mr. Cotton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to
can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that.